Good morning and welcome back to another We Are Sunderland morning briefing. It is Friday, the 9th of February. I'm joined by Dom Shaw. How are you doing, John?
I'm all right, mate. Yourself?
Yeah, all good, all good. We've got plenty to discuss today, but just a little bit of housekeeping first of all. Obviously, We Are Sunderland. We're in partnership with the Farm Museum, and you might have seen online. We're having a night of players, pundits, and podcasters on February the 23rd, 7 p.m. till late. Tickets are £5, and they all go to the Farm Museum to help continue with the support and work they do in the community and raise awareness around men's mental health issues. You may have seen that the podcast's now live wherever you get your podcasts if you're not watching on social media. If you're watching on YouTube, again, the support over there has been great. Don't forget to like, subscribe and comment. And yeah, let's get straight into things. Dom, we were at his Michael Beale's press conference yesterday. I thought he was a lot more relaxed than he has been in previous weeks. I don't know about yourself.
Yeah, definitely. Even more so as well when the cameras were off, I think.
Yeah.
And when you're speaking to the written press, and I think you often find that with managers or head coaches when it just feels like they can relax a little bit when the cameras are off. And I guess if they make an inadvertent slip, then they can correct themselves. It's not there, and it's not there being streamed live. I thought Beale spoke well yesterday. There was plenty to go at, wasn't there? I think the standout stuff really was the Romaine Mundle stuff, where he basically said, a week ago when he came in, I kind of thought he hadn't been playing in the first half of the season at Standard Liège. I didn't really expect much from him, but I've been surprised, and it almost said that I've had to change my plan with him really, and suggested that he's very much gonna play a part in the second half of the season. And I know we'll probably talk about this more at length when we look ahead to the game against Plymouth on Saturday. But he talked about the kind of exciting team selection dilemmas he might have, didn't he? He brought it upon himself to suggest that he might be able to play Roberts, Barr and Clark in the same team. Then he talked about Mundle and even playing four, didn't he, behind a striker? I mean, he did kind of cut himself there and say that's probably as exciting for the opposition as it is for us. For all the talk of strikers this season, and no doubt we're going to talk about it again here, and the struggles really, that army of players he's got behind the striker, I think would be the envy of every manager in the Championship.
Yeah, it's hard to disagree, isn't it? The only thing that I would say is that they've spoken about XG and where they've been with that, and they haven't been too far off. They did, take a bit of a plummet when Beale came in, but whether, Christian Speakman hinted that it, they'd foreshadowed that sort of like drop, which is why they got rid of Mowbray. But then they are creating chances, like that Boro game at the weekend just gone. There was 3 or 4 good balls in the box, particularly in the last 10 minutes. I know that Luke Thomas turned one just wide of the post towards the end, but it was just, like we say, we're crying out for a striker. But the balls in the box are a yard or so behind the striker in the dangerous area. And Beale touched on it there, didn't he, in his presser, and said, yeah, it's just about working on it. We are working on that ball in the box, getting there in the final third. But as you say, that fall behind is frightening, especially if they're all on their game. We saw at the end of Stoke, didn't we? When they'd gone sort of three goals to the good, it was you could see the confidence there, which maybe we haven't seen. I feel like the shackles have been let off a little bit. They've been made a bit more solid under Beale. They look like they've got a bit more of a defensive structure, and they only conceded 2 shots on goal at Boro. So it's there. It's clear to see, but it's just unlocking that final third again and allowing the players to have that creative freedom while still being solid at the other end.
And what he did talk about yesterday is the balance, didn't he? That like exactly what you said there. That he said, "I'm aware of what teams are being picked outside of this building." Which you can all look at that from like a football manager perspective, can't you? And think, "Wow, unleash all 4 of them. Let's see what they're capable of." But Beale talked about that balance, and which links in with what you were saying there. I think the other thing he said was, and clearly you look at the last 2 weeks. Rusin's goal against Middlesbrough on Saturday clearly was helped by the goalkeeper, Tom Glover, making a mistake. The week earlier, Mason Burstall's goal against Stoke was like a scruffy, bundled finish. But what the hell does that matter, really? They've scored. And how often do you hear kind of football fans, we've all said it doesn't matter if it's a scrappy goal. You want a striker there on the spot, getting into the positions. I was disappointed with Burstow at Boro because after that Stoke game, you were hoping for liftoff, and I'm conscious of the fact that I was sat here last week saying, I think what Burstow needs now is probably a run of 5 games, and yet I probably expect Roos now to be in from the off against Plymouth on Saturday. But Beale was saying that we've had goals from our strikers now in the last 2 games. I'm seeing promising signs. We've got some stuff to come out of what he was saying on Hamia, Luis Semedo, where he was talking about his finishing in training is brilliant. He just needs to work on the other things. The proof's in the pudding, isn't it? That Roofsin and Burstow need to keep scoring goals, and I think Roofsin probably looks. I think I don't think he sees Roofsin as a number 9. I think he sees Roofsin as more of kind of an outside forward or a deeper forward. The problem is he's got so many of them and so few strikers that his hand's forced really on that, isn't it?
Yeah, it's something that me and Joe spoke about on Monday. Obviously, it sounds hypocritical to say it, give such and such a run, and then a week later you change into the other striker. But that's what we're being fed, isn't it, from the managerials, like team selection. So 1 minute it's Burstow, then it's Roofsin. I agree with you on Roofsin. I do think it's Beale's spoken about it a number of times now. He's not just the number 9. Okay, fair enough, but you're talking about playing him in another role. But you simply cannot drop Jack Clarke from that left-hand side of the pitch just because of his output. But it would be interesting to see. We don't necessarily have the cup games. Like, he doesn't have the cup games to maybe see where you could rotate or whatever. So I do think it's probably a longer term thing rather than the immediate, like, here and now, especially if Jack Clarke does leave in the summer. But I agree, Roofsin sort of scored his goal from. He was practically as a right winger on that side of the pitch. But yeah, there's a lot of options, but it's whether we see those options, because as the season goes on, the need for points, if they're still there or thereabouts in the playoffs, he's going to play his strongest team and not tinker with what he thinks or who he thinks can play where, isn't he? So while I agree, he's got options. It's just when finding the time to play them.
100%, and I think the balance of the team of the squad probably is you look at the midfield, for example, Bellingham, Ekwa, and Neil. They're probably all 8s rather than a 6 in there. We talked about Corey Evans yesterday and how he's still at least a month away. Just on the injury front, if you haven't seen Bradley Dack, it's another month or so for him. Elliot Embleton's expected to play for the 21s tonight against Leicester, which is a big boost. Dan Ballard's fit for Saturday. But that midfield, I think in midfield, it's a bit samey, really. 3, I love watching Ekwa, Neil, and Bellingham play, especially Ekwa. I thought Ekwa against Stoke was class, and when Ekwa's on song, I don't think there are many better players at what he does in the Championship. It's finding that balance, isn't it, in midfield? And I think that's now going to be the same challenge he has further forward, really. But like you say, he doesn't have any opportunities to tinker. He has to kind of learn as he goes, really. Because when you look at that league table, every game now is absolutely decisive, isn't it? And there are very few games, really, when you look at the table, where you're coming up against teams who have nothing to play for. That's the magic of this division, really, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, just on that, like you said, I mean, I don't know if I had my rose-tinted glasses on in the first half, but I actually thought the midfield were really impressive. And I don't know if you see, sometimes when you watch on the telly, you don't really see the off-the-ball work. I thought first half in particular, they actually stopped a lot of the play going through Howson and Barlas, and it wasn't until the second half where I thought Barlas got a bit more on the ball, and coincidentally, that's where Boro sort of started to stamp their authority on a bit. They played with Neil deeper of the 3 again, and I don't think that's his preferred role, but I actually think he's looked the most accomplished out of the 3 who've played there. It allowed Job and Ekwa to sort of push further forward as 8, but they also had a job on the hands with Boro's fullbacks. So, like you say, the balance there's been really good. I do think the introduction of Callum Styles in the coming weeks, we'll see what he's like. it's a funny one there as well, because, you know, they spoke about, I asked Christian Speakman up, so was Callum Styles brought in with the eye to bringing in a holding midfield player? And he actually said, I don't know where the holding midfielder rhetoric's come from, but a week prior, Michael Beale had said, would like a number 6 so that you can have the likes of Neil and Ekwa playing further forward. So it is still an area that I think they need to either bring in or have a play around and see who fits that role best. Obviously, as you've touched on there, like Corey Evans, he's the out and out man who would fill that. But, you know, he's been crocked for nearly a year, and there doesn't seem to be any sign of him coming back either, does there?
No, and you look at Evans now, I mean, he hasn't played since January of last year. And Beale talked yesterday about how, I think rather than the actual injury now, it was a serious knee injury. He talked about kind of when you're coming back from an injury of that severity, you obviously get complications along the way. It's probably that knock-on effect, isn't it, of coming back and your body getting used to the impact again. But where are we now? We're approaching the middle of February. Evans is still, by all accounts, looking like a month or so away. Then you're in the last 6-7 weeks of the season. Realistically, is he going to play any major role this season? I think that's extremely unlikely. I agree with you. I think Neil isn't a natural number 6, but I think he looks more comfortable there than Ekwa, and I think him playing there allows Ekwa to do what he does best. He's a driver, isn't he, Ekwa? At times watching Ekwa reminds me of, remember when you were at primary school and you played with a year or two above yourself and you couldn't get a kick because they were bigger and stronger and better. Yeah. When Ekwa's on his game, he's like that. It's as though he's playing a different game to some of the others, and he's just better and stronger and faster and more imposing. And I love watching him. If Beale can get the best out of Ekwa, then I think that'll go a long way to Sunderland's success in the second half of the season, because I think that was key to last season's success in the second half of the season, more towards the end of the campaign. Learned to get a tune out of Ekwa, didn't he? How much had he talked about how he needs to be nastier? I want to see a bit more edge and bite from him. And it's the same with Bellingham, really, isn't it? You forget Bellingham's age. It's testament to him that he's played in as many different positions, obviously that he's played as much football. It's finding a way to get the best out of those 3 brilliant talents.
Yeah, I remember watching Ekwa for the under-21s, and I remember one of the first couple of times I watched him, I thought, oh, you know, well, he's a Rolls Royce, you've got a player there. He just rode tackles. The only thing I would have said, and perhaps it's still one of his downfalls of his game today, is sometimes he just wants a little bit too much time on the ball. That's the only real downside of.
So it kind of comes a bit too easy to him, isn't it?
Yeah, especially when they want to play with a bit of pace, and sometimes he can slow the ball down, but that's not taken away from anything, you know, from his play overall. I think he's really good. Just on that, I think that's something that Sunderland have done really well actually in the past year or so, especially since the takeover, is the integration of players down. Now, I've done a big bit on obviously how the academy's sort of transformed in recent years, but Adil Al-Shish, he got 90 minutes. Luis Semedo played on Monday night. Mundle got an hour, but you're starting to see players who are still eligible, which is quite frightening, but drop down to that level. So the club itself is like using all the tools it's had available, and it perhaps hasn't done that in the past. Mundle on Monday night, I thought, for his first outing, I actually thought he was really good. Joe's done a really good piece on him, looking back at his time at Standard Liège, so that's on the website today if you want to take a look at that. But yeah, just on what he's going to bring, because he is different to Jack Clarke, and Michael Beale touched on that, didn't he, in his presser? Again, we've got a bit on the site about that. But he's just, Jack Clarke's more of a ball carrier, come deep, carry the ball, get Sunderland up the pitch, whereas Mundle was a real willing runner in behind. He's got pace to burn. Again, similar to Clarke, though, he cuts in on his right, and there's 1 or 2 occasions where he could have scored. There was one where it was cleared off the line, but he is a real prospect, I think, and you could see why Sunderland have gone for him. The only caveat I'd say is the first time I watched Isaac Lahadji last year, I thought, well, he's a player as well, but then he just didn't. He was one where he never seemed to get out of like second gear and really cut it in in the first team. But as you say, like plenty of youngsters come over, and that's the game, isn't it? You've got to fulfill that potential whilst knowing that there's a player in there.
I think that the obvious difference with Mundle is like he knows our game. Do you know what he grew up at Tottenham? He trained in Tottenham's first team under Antonio Conte. Antonio Conte, by all accounts, was a big fan, and kind of while that contract uncertainty was going on at Tottenham, there were Premier League clubs interested in him. I think the Standard Liège move was a bit of a punt from him, really, but fair play to him, because I think what that shows is he's kind of willing to be brave. He's willing to not take the easy option, really. And although that didn't work out with him, I've spoken to various managers over the years where they've talked about loan moves. I know this wasn't a loan, but they've talked about loans, talked about how sometimes a bad loan can be more beneficial than a good loan, because it's all you learn. Often when you're young lads, it's the first time you're living away from home. Things aren't going to plan and you've got to deal with that. I think Mundle has learned so much in his 6 months in Belgium. Clearly a difficult time on the pitch and all that's come with that. Like, I think it has the makings of being one of those signings where a couple of years down the line, a bit like Jack Clark, really, where a couple of years down the line, other clubs are thinking like, why weren't we alert to that? Why weren't we aware of that? Now, I say that having not watched him, because I wasn't at the game on Monday night. But just everything I've read, everything I've heard, and what Beale had to say at his press conference yesterday, Beale said he's made it clear he wants to play, and he wants to play now. I think he's exciting. I think the fact Clark's there will help Mundle as well, because it was only a couple of weeks ago that Speakman was talking about the need to maybe set out expectations for young signings. And be more transparent with our bigger picture plan for them, just so there's not too much expectation early on. Now, Beale's saying what he said yesterday about Mundle will only build hopes and expectations. But I think the fact that you've got Jack Clark and Abdullah Bar and Pat Roberts and whoever else is clearly going to make it difficult for Mundle to get in. That allows him to just find his feet, doesn't it? And slowly get to grips without being thrust straight into the team. I think that's been part of the problem with Hamia and the other strikers as well. Beale said it yesterday. Hamia's wearing the number 9. He's come in, he's wearing the number 9. He was the only striker, the only permanent striker signed really long before the start of the season. Rusin, obviously, in my end, came in late. Burstow was alone. So he was kind of the hope, really. In an ideal world, you get a striker of his relative inexperience and age, and you slowly bed him in. There hasn't been the opportunity to do that. I think that's something that Sunderland are learning the need to do.
Yeah, just interestingly, on that loan stuff that you said about bad loan, that's exactly what Lyndon Gooch told me on a couple of weeks ago. Is he had a loan spell at Gateshead, and obviously he played. It was quite a good loan spell, but he says even like that wasn't. He didn't have to move away, but even then you're getting used to learning on the job. That was his first sort of role in senior football, and he had a lot to learn. So it's interesting that, I think Triantis gave away 2 penalties against Celtic in midweek, but he's playing. He's put
against Celtic. Yeah,
Beale said that as well, didn't he? Look, he's gone up there and he's had 2 90 minutes in 4 days, which is more than what he'd be able to get if he was still in the under-21s. Obviously, I think, was it you that asked him about him here in the under-21s? So,
and Mayenda he explained the Mayenda loan, didn't he?
It's about managing those players and where they're at. But just on the Speakman comment as well, I think what hasn't helped is obviously the conversation then was around the strikers, wasn't it? And they weren't scoring. So if you brought in 4, you would expect 1 to score. We're slowly getting past that point. We've got goals now coming slowly. But yeah, it's difficult because you can't criticize fans or have a go at fans for expecting a striker to score a goal. That's the whole job that might have been bought, isn't it? So
100%. And I think Burstow has struggled because of maybe the weight of expectation. When Burstow signed, I thought he has the look of being a proper signing. He'd been playing for Chelsea or certainly involved for Chelsea in the early weeks of the season. That, for one reason or another, hasn't worked out. I suspect that, just shifting ahead to Plymouth this weekend, I suspect it'll be Rusin now who gets a chance. What do you reckon?
Yeah. I mean, I know we touched on how they'd set up at Boro, and they didn't. They actually took the game to them. So I was surprised. Beale spoke about Burstow playing a bit deeper against Stoke, and to be fair, he said it worked. It didn't work at Boro. I do think the way Michael Beale was speaking was, I think we'll go back to like the 4-3-3 that we've seen, but I do think Rusyn will start through the middle, just because he spoke about taking the game to them. Sunderland struggled with low blocks, haven't they? Like at home, just not just this year, but last year, even in League One, they struggled when teams came and sat behind the ball. It's about finding how they get through that. I've toyed with the thought. Now, again, Michael Beale said, the picking the teams and how it works, it doesn't always work because you need a balance. But I do generally think on Burstow, I actually think you would benefit from playing with Rusyn as a 2, rather than, because you've got a body close to him, it allows Rusyn to float about. So maybe that's something that you'd see on the road. I don't think we'd see it at home to Plymouth, because like you say, you've got plenty of options across that with Clark, Paddy Roberts coming back, Bar. I agree with you. I think Rusyn, if it's typical, I'm laughing because if Rusyn starts and then Burstow comes off the bench and scores, then the conversation again is Burstow should start. But
and if Rusyn starts and scores, we're here next week saying Rusyn needs 4 or 5 games now. He needs a run, like we were saying with Burstow. I mean, clearly on Plymouth, I've seen Plymouth a couple of times this season. Really impressed with them. Like clearly Whittaker's their standout player, but it helps for Sunderland that they played that 120 grueling midweek minute. I mean, 120 minutes against a team like Leeds. Anyway, I think it's the mental, the mental examination that Leeds give you as well as the physical one. But to be played in such grueling conditions as well, and then have the long trip up. I like Plymouth. I've been really impressed with them, but I think this has the look of a real opportunity for Sunderland, especially on the back of 2 positive results.
Yeah, I mean, we spoke about it before the Boro game, didn't we? Saying that if you get a result or a positive result at Boro, I mean, a point is a positive result if you back it up with wins.
Yeah,
it's.
And Beale said that yesterday, didn't he?
Yeah.
Anything away from home, if you win your home games, then anything on the road's a decent result. And if Sunderland do that between now and the end of the season, they'll be fine.
Yeah, there's favourable run of games, isn't it, as well, coming up against teams in the bottom half. Of course, everybody has something to play for. Like you said to me yesterday, every championship manager will say that, won't they? Every game's a tough one. You've got to be at your best. But football cliche aside, like it's true. I think just on Plymouth, they've been one of the teams that hasn't surprised, because they did so well last year, but they're clearly a well-coached side. Like, I know Schumacher has moved on.
I was just about to say that.
But they are such a well-coached side. You can see, there's a philosophy there and how they want to play. They might not have the biggest budget, but they look a really good side.
Yeah, you look at the teams that came up, Sheffield Wednesday and the chaos that went on there. I mean, Ipswich. I think the might of Ipswich. You always fancied Ipswich to go on, and we talked about it before, the money that they were throwing about in League One last year. Nathan Broadhead last January, for example. So I always fancied them to give it a right good go this year. Maybe not to enjoy quite the success they have. But I think Plymouth's relative success is a success for coaching, for sticking with the principles and coming up with an idea and sticking with that. And they've lost Finn Azaz, who went back to Aston Villa and then went to Middlesbrough. Like, clearly they were in a battle to keep hold of Whittaker when Lazio were linked with every winger in Europe over the course of the January transfer window. But you look at them and think they're going to have more than enough to stay in the league.
And even in the last 4 as well, aren't they?
And even after losing Schumacher, kind of a bit of an outside the box appointment, and he started well.
Yeah, they're unbeaten in their last 4 in the league, aren't they? 1-2, I think the last, they've won against Swansea, won against Cardiff, drew with Watford, drew with Huddersfield. So, I mean, they're no mugs, they're no pushovers. They're unbeaten in 4 coming into this. But again, like you say there, it's a real good opportunity, I feel, for Sunderland now to start to put a run together. That's one thing we haven't seen. I was taking a look at the table the other day, and it sounds absolutely ridiculous to say this, but I don't think we've seen enough draws from Sunderland. They haven't been able to grind out games in that sense. Like 13 wins, 5 draws, 12 defeats. I know they've spoken about consistency. Beale said about deciding what team we are, but it's if you aren't going to win a game, make sure you don't get beat. It's the
If you can't win,
straightforward.
don't lose. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
Straightforward as that.
I wonder whether that's an element of the inexperience of the squad, maybe in a bit of like naivety and lack of like maybe streetwise championship thinking in there. Mowbray talked about it, didn't he, in the summer, and then Beale came in and talked about maybe the need to add some grey hairs. Like I think game man, you come up. Beale talked about it yesterday, didn't he, with the midfield and saying against Middlesbrough last week, his 3 young midfielders came up against Johnny Howson and Dan Barlasser, who were 2 kind of streetwise, shrewd championship midfielders. God knows how many games. I think it's more than 600 games Johnny Howson's played. Dan Barlasser knows this division inside out. He's played in it with Rotherham and Boro. It's Sunderland's youngsters are having to learn on the job, but I wonder whether that is an element of I wonder whether that's part of the reason for maybe that lack of draws. Because as we go back to if you're going to win your home games, then if Sunderland just keep ticking over away from home, picking up results and not getting beat, especially I think Michael Carrick talked about this before the Sunderland game last week, where he said because you're playing a direct rival, it sounds obvious, I know, but not only are you winning if you do win, but a direct rival is losing. A direct rival isn't picking up points. And I think there's so many teams in that cluster who are looking for 5th and 6th places. If you're coming up against these teams, if you don't win, kind of second most important is making sure they don't get the 3 points on the board and they don't build the momentum. I still think West Brom look like solid, don't they? You can't see West Brom form falling off a cliff. But Sunderland obviously are absolutely Hull, Coventry, Sunderland, Watford, Norwich, Boro, but they're inconsistent. There's clearly that cluster of teams, and it's going to be consistency that gets that 6th spot, isn't it?
Yeah, like you say there. I mean, from West Brom down, I think they're on 48. Bristol City in 14th on 38 now. I don't think really anybody's talking about Bristol City in consideration for that. But you saw last year, Boro, just one team can put a run together and just end up in there by flying up the league. Like
Coventry have done it this year, really, haven't they? They've come from nowhere to be in the position they're in now. Yeah,
it is. Like you say, it is. It's just consistency, and the thing is with consistency is there's no direct solution for it. Is it like if everybody could be consistent, then they'd be in there, wouldn't they? So yeah, thanks for joining me, Dom.
No worries. What do you reckon prediction wise? Saturday, I've answered Sunderland. I think 2-1. I think.
Yeah, I was going to go 2-1. I think it'll be 2-1. They've done well at the back, but I can't see them. For some reason, I just see Plymouth nicking one. As long as it's not first goal, because you always get the feeling, don't you, if the away side scores first, here we go, it's going to be one of them.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm fancying Sunderland this weekend. Thanks for joining me, Dom.
Cheers, mate. Thanks a lot.
As I said at the start, We Are Sunderland's live. We're in partnership with the Farm Museum. You can take advantage of our launch offer, just £1 for 6 months. If you've been watching on YouTube, don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave a comment. And if you're on our other podcast platforms, drop us a follow over on there. We'll catch you next week.